Hello everyone and welcome to video tutorial 25. You should now know all about blood vessels and you should be able to pause the video and answer the question. The question is, decide if each of the following statements about blood vessels is true or false and tick the appropriate box. If the statement is false, write the corrected word in the correction box to replace the words underlined in the statement. So pause the video and try to answer it before I go over the answers. So the answer would be that capillaries contain valves. This would be false. And we want to change the word that's underlined to the correct word, so it would be veins, because it's the veins that have the valves. And then veins allow gas exchange. Again, this would be false. And you'd want to correct the one word, so it would be changed to capillaries are the thing that allows gas exchange. And the last one is blood leaves the heart and arteries. That one is true, so you would need to put in a correction. So well done if you managed to get that correct. If you didn't, you need to go watch the blood vessel video again. So false veins, false capillaries, and true would be the correct answer. Today we're going to be moving on to looking at the heart, which is still part of Key Area 6, Animal Transport. If you want the worksheets to go with the video, remember to pause the video and go to 2 Multicellular, 6 Transport Systems and Animals, 2 Consumables and Activities, and the PowerPoint is found in 1 PowerPoint and is called 6.3 The Heart. Our learning intention is to be able to identify and name the 4 chambers of the heart, identify and name the major blood vessels leading into and out of the heart, state the role of the coronary arteries, describe the pathway of blood through the heart, lungs and body, and explain why valves are present in the heart. To be successful, you will need to identify and name the 4 chambers of the heart, identify and name the major blood vessels leading into and out of the heart, state the role of the coronary arteries, describe the pathway of blood through the heart, lungs and body, and explain why valves are present in the heart. So how does the blood flow around the body? The oxygenated blood flows from the lungs through the heart to the body. The oxygenated blood flows back from the body through the heart into the lungs. So our deoxygenated blood comes into the heart, then it goes to the lungs to get oxygenated, and then once it goes through the lungs it returns to the heart oxygenated, and then it's pumped around the body, and then the body uses all of the oxygen, and then it's taken back to the heart, and then it's taken to the lungs and so forth. The circulatory system has a double circulation. So the blood flows twice through the heart for each circuit. So lungs have a separate circulation to the rest of the body. This is where the oxygen is picked up, obviously, in the lungs. Usually in class we would make a note of this and stick it in. You can find this diagram in Consumables under 8 circulation. Remember from the last video that veins take the blood towards the heart and arteries take the blood away from the heart, because arteries begin with A. So the deoxygenated blood from the body comes into the heart. So this is by a vein. It then goes out of the heart by an artery. It then goes to the lungs and gets oxygenated, where it's returned in a vein, and then it goes out of an artery, where the blood is then pumped to the rest of the body, and then it comes back to the heart, and the deoxygenated from the blood from the body goes through a vein into the heart, then goes out of the heart to the lungs by an artery, then comes back to the heart through a vein, and then goes out of the heart to the rest of the body, and so forth. The circulatory system is made up of the heart and blood vessels. This system carries blood to all regions of the body. We have looked in detail at the blood and blood vessels, so now we are looking in detail at the heart. The heart is a pump composed of cardiac muscle. The function of the heart is to pump blood around the body. The heart consists of 4 chambers, and you need to know and label the 4 chambers. So you've got your right and left atrium, which are always at the top, and your right and left ventricle, which are always at the bottom. So the atria both receive blood back into the heart, while the ventricles both pump blood out of the heart, and you need to know that. So atria receive the blood because they're at the top, ventricles pump blood out of the heart. So you need to be able to label the different parts of the heart. You can find this diagram in consumables. So the right side of the heart is opposite to your right, and the same with the left side of the heart is opposite to your left. This is because it would be the right side if you were looking at another person lying flat in front of you. So always remember that the right side is actually to your left hand side, and your left hand side is to your right hand side. So you need to be able to label these 4 different chambers. So you've got your right atrium at the top, and then your right ventricle at the bottom. And then on the other side, you've got your left atrium on the top, and you've got your left ventricle on the bottom. A always is above B in the diagram, so always remember A comes first in the alphabet, so it's always got to be above the B. A good idea is to look and pause the video and look at it for 5 minutes, then try to remember it and try to write it from memory, and then do this until you've learned all of the different parts of the heart. And then there's also a label for the cardiac muscle that the heart is made up of. So make sure you know all of the different chambers and know how to label it before you move on. The heart ventricle walls are different thickness. The wall of the left ventricle is very thick since it has to pump blood to all parts of the body. The wall on the right ventricle is less thick since it only has to pump blood to the lungs. So you can see the difference there in the diagram. So you need to know that hearts have valves just like veins do. The heart valves are to stop the backflow of blood so that the blood can only travel in one direction, so just the same as the veins. You need to learn this description. So heart valves prevent the backflow of blood so that blood can only travel in one direction. So here is a diagram of the valves that you get. So there's a valve between the atrium and ventricle, and then there's a valve between the ventricle and going out of the heart. You don't need to know the name of the valve, you just need to know where roundabouts they are positioned. Now we need to learn the blood vessels. So you should already know from the last video that arteries take blood away from the heart, and the 2 arteries that you need to know are the pulmonary artery, which takes the blood from the heart to the lungs where it can be oxygenated, and the aorta, which is the main artery in the body, which takes the blood from the heart to all of the parts of the body. We also need to know the 2 veins, and from the last video we should know that the veins take the blood towards the heart. So the main vein in the body is the vena cava, and it takes the blood from all of the body to the heart, and then the pulmonary vein takes the blood from the lungs and brings it to the heart. So make sure you know all 4 of these different blood vessels. So again, an idea is to look at it for 5 minutes, try to remember it and write it down from memory, and keep doing this until you can draw the heart and label all of the different parts of the heart. So make sure you know this before you move on. In consumables, you should be able to find this diagram to fill in. Hearts can be drawn at slightly different angles and in different ways, so don't let it throw you. Always look for what you know and what there is to work with. So pause the video and try to identify the main vessels of the heart from what you have done before, and pause it, and then I will go over the answers. So the answer is that the vena cava should be that one, and it is the vein that carries the deoxygenated blood back from the body. And now we need to try to identify the next blood vessel. So you always know the vena cava is that because it goes into the right atrium. Right, so we want to find out the pulmonary artery, and we know that the pulmonary artery needs to come from the right ventricle, so it must be this one here. So your pulmonary artery carries your deoxygenated blood to the lungs. Then we need to find out the other vein. So we know that the veins come into the atrium, so the left atrium, and the vein that does that is the pulmonary vein, so it carries the oxygenated blood from the lungs to the heart. Right, and then for the next one, we need to figure out where the next blood vessel is. So we know it'll come out of the ventricle because it is an artery. So the next one would be your aorta, which takes the oxygenated blood to all of the body. So aorta artery carrying oxygenated blood to the body. So well done if you managed to get that correct. If you didn't, then make sure you watch this part of the video again before you move on. So make sure you learn it at each stage before you advance. So to summarise everything that has just been said, the oxygenated side is always the right side of the heart as the blood has not been yet to the lungs. The oxygenated side is always the left side because the blood has been to the lungs. When oxygen has been used by your body tissues and used throughout your body, it comes through the vena cava and into the right atrium. So it's the deoxygenated blood that comes into the vena cava, into the right atrium. Then it travels past the valve and it goes into the right ventricle. Then the blood goes out of the right ventricle, is pushed up into the pulmonary artery. The pulmonary artery takes the blood to the lungs so it can be oxygenized. Then from the lungs, the pulmonary vein brings the oxygenated blood back to the heart into the left atrium. The blood is then taken from the left atrium past the valve to the left ventricle. Then the left ventricle pumps it out and the blood is then taken by the aorta to the rest of the body. So well done if you managed to get all of that correct. You need to be able to learn this diagram and learn how the blood travels around the body. So make sure you learn that before you move on. So make sure you can label the heart and know the direction of the blood. Usually in class we would do an activity to learn the heart, which involves a group of about 3 people. So if you don't have a group of 3 people, then there is a way to modify this. So to modify it, you would print out a picture of the heart poster from consumables, so it's just the same heart as we just looked at, and you'd look at it for 3 minutes and be away from your piece of paper and pen. Then you'd come back to your piece of paper and pen and write down everything that you can remember. You'd then do this until your drawing was the same as the poster. So give that a go if you are at home. This just shows the poster that you should have memorised about the heart. So it shows all of the different labels of the heart that you need to know. Let's go over the blood flow around the heart again. So let's start with the blood entering the vena cava. So see if you can pause the video and make a flow diagram of where the blood goes before I go over the answer with you. So from the vena cava, the blood should go into the right atrium, and then from the right atrium, the blood should go into the valve. Then it should go through the valve into the right ventricle, and then it should go the valve, and then it should go into the pulmonary artery, where the blood will be taken to the lungs to be oxygenized. So all of the other times the blood has been deoxygenized, so after it goes through the lungs, it will get oxygenated, and then it will go through the pulmonary vein. Then when it goes from the pulmonary vein, it should go into the left atrium, and then from the left atrium it should pass through a valve into the left ventricle, and then from the left ventricle it should pass through a valve, and then it should go to the aorta where it is pumped to all of the body so the body cells can get oxygen. Obviously the blue parts are where the blood is deoxygenated and the red parts are where it's not oxygenated, sorry. So you should be able to write the blood flow around the heart, and you should be able to write it out without help. If you can't, then make sure you pause the video and memorize this before you move on. Here is a past paper question. See if you can pause the video and answer the question before I go over the answers. So the diagram below shows a section through the human heart. Describe the pathway of blood through the heart and associated structures starting at X and finishing at Y. There is no need to mention the valves and it is worth 5 marks. So pause it, try to get the answers. So the answer would be, first of all, you need to figure out what X is. So X is the right atrium. So then you want to figure out where it goes from the right atrium. So the blood would go from the right atrium to the right ventricle. So well done if you managed to get that correct. And then from the right ventricle, the blood would go through the pulmonary artery, and then the blood would go to the lungs. So again, well done if you managed to get that correct. The blood would then get oxygenized at the lungs, and then it would come through the pulmonary vein into the left atrium, down to the left ventricle. So again, well done if you're managing to get all of this correct. And then it would go up through Y, which is the aorta, and it would go to the rest of the body. So this is the marking scheme. So it says X is the right atrium, blood starts in the right atrium, blood goes to the right ventricle, blood goes into the pulmonary artery, blood goes to the lungs, then the blood goes back to the heart through the pulmonary vein. And then it says the blood enters the left atrium, then the blood goes to the left ventricle, blood goes to the aorta, and then from the aorta it goes to the rest of the body. So again, well done if you got that correct. If you didn't, then you need to watch the video again. For this next activity, you need to work out what all of the numbers represent. So pause the video and try to write down what each number would be before I go over the answers. So the answer would be that 1 would be the thing that brings the blood from the body to the right atrium, which would be your vena cava. Then your right atrium takes your blood to your right ventricle, which then takes your blood, and answer number 2 should be to your pulmonary artery, which then takes the blood to the lungs, where it's oxygenated, and then it should go to number 3, which is your pulmonary vein. Remember, veins always take it to the heart, whereas arteries always away from the heart. So from your pulmonary vein, it goes to your left atrium. From your left atrium, you should have got 4 as your left ventricle. And then finally, number 5 would then be your aorta, which would take the oxygenated blood around the rest of the body. Well done if you managed to get that correct. If not, you need to watch the video again. This is just another way the heart might be drawn. So again, the deoxygenated blood will come in through the vena cava and it will enter the right atrium, which you already know. The blood will then go to the right ventricle, and from the right ventricle it will be taken out of the pulmonary artery, where it will go to the lungs and it will get oxygenated. The blood that's oxygenated will then come back, and it will come back through the pulmonary vein into the left atrium. Once it's in the left atrium, it will then go to the left ventricle, and then after it's been in the left ventricle, it will then go to the aorta and be taken to the rest of the body. So well done if you've managed to get that correct. If not, then go watch the video again. So now let's try some SQA past paper questions. So the first question says, which line in the table below correctly identifies the 4 chambers of the heart labelled W, X, Y and Z? So pause the video and try to come up with the answer before I go over the answer with you. So the answer would be that W would be your right atrium. So it's either going to be C or D. And then X we know would be our left atrium, so it's either going to be C or D. And then our Y, because that's next in the table, would be our right ventricle, so it would have to be D. And our Z would be our left ventricle. So well done if you put D. If not, then you need to go watch the video again. The next question is, the graph below shows the relationship between concentration of oxygen available and the concentration of oxyhemoglobin in the blood of a mammal. What is the available increase in the concentration of oxyhemoglobin when the concentration of available oxygen increases from 2 units to 12 units? So first of all, we need to work out what the concentration of oxyhemoglobin is at when concentration of oxygen is 2, which would be 20. And then we need to work it out when it's at 12, which would be 92, 4, 6, so 96. And then we need to take away 20 from the 96. You can work out that it is going up in twos because there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 little lines. So you would just do 10 divided by how many of our little boxes are in between. In this case it is 5, so that gives you that you're going up in 2. That is a trick with graphs. So whatever this number is divided by how many little boxes there is will give you what you are going up in. So the answer to this question should be 76. So well done if you managed to get it correct. The next question says the diagram shows the chambers and blood vessels in the mammalian heart. Complete the table below by using the correct number from the diagram for each description. So you want the chamber that receives the blood from the lungs, the artery that carries blood from the heart to the body, the chamber that pumps blood to the lungs, and the vein that carries blood from the body to the heart. So pause the video and try to come up with the answers before I go over the answers with you. So the answers are the chamber that receives blood from the lungs would be this chamber here, so number 2. The artery that carries blood from the heart to the body, that would be the main artery, which is 6, which is your aorta. The chamber that pumps blood to the lungs would be your chamber 3, which is your right ventricle. And your vein that carries blood from the body to the heart would be 7, which would be your vena cava. So well done if you managed to get that correct. If you didn't, you'll need to watch the video again. So the next question is the diagram shows the heart and part of the circulatory system in a human. So you've got your lungs, your vessel Y, your heart, your vessel X. Which line in the table below describes correctly the blood in vessels X and Y? So pause the video and try to answer this yourself before I go over the answer. So the answer would be that your vessel X is taking your blood from your heart to your lungs, so it must be deoxygenated. So it's either going to be A or D. And your vessel Y is taking it from the lungs to the heart, so it's going to be oxygenated. So your answer must be D. So well done if you managed to get that correct. If not, go back and watch the video again. The next question says the diagram below shows an external surface view of a human heart. And then it says name blood vessel O, which carries blood to the lungs, name artery P, which carries oxygenated blood to the body, and name artery Q, which supplies the heart muscle with oxygen. So pause the video and try to answer it before I go over the answers. So the answers are blood vessel O, which carries blood to the lungs. So this one here is going to be your pulmonary artery. Artery P, which carries oxygenated blood to the body, so this one here is going to be your aorta. And name artery Q, which supplies the heart muscles with oxygen. So we know the heart has its own blood supply, and it is called the coronary arteries that supply it with its own blood. So well done if you managed to get this correct. If you didn't, then go back and watch the video again. The next question is which line in the table correctly identifies the type of blood carried in blood vessels P, Q and R. So pause the video and try to come up with answers before I go over the answer with you. So the answer would be that first of all we have to identify the blood in P is oxygenated or deoxygenated. Well, we know it's coming from the body, it's going into the heart, so it must be deoxygenated. So the answer is either going to be A or B. Then we have to look at Q, so that's this one here. Well, we know that the blood goes into P, into the heart, comes out, goes to the lungs, gets oxygenated, comes back through R, and then goes out of Q. So Q must be oxygenated. So it could either be A or B. And the last one, R. So it comes back from the lungs into the heart via R, so it has to be oxygenated. So the answer is A, so well done if you managed to get that correct. So blood travels in 3 types of blood vessels. Compare the structure of 2 of these types of vessels. So you should have already answered this in the previous video. So pause the video and answer the question. So the answer would be, for the 3 marks, you would need to pick any 2 of either arteries, veins, or capillaries, and then you'd have to give a comparison of the thickness of the walls, muscularity of the walls, the presence and absence of valves, the size of the channel for blood flow. So for example, you could have put that arteries have a thick wall, whereas veins have a thinner wall, or that capillaries have a 1-cell thick wall. You could have put that arteries have a narrow diameter, whereas veins have a wide diameter in their channel, or capillaries have a narrow diameter. You could have put that the function of arteries is to transport blood away from the heart, the function of veins is to transport blood towards the heart, and the function of capillaries is for the exchange of substances at tissues. And you could have put that the blood is carried under high pressure in an artery, it's carried under a low pressure in a vein, and it is carried under a reducing pressure in capillaries. Or you could have put that arteries carry mostly oxygenated blood, veins carry mostly deoxygenated blood, and capillaries would be the exchange of substances. So well done if you managed to get the 3 marks for that. So make sure you know the definitions of arteries, veins, capillaries, and you can compare them before you move on. So it says for question 3, the list below refers to the features of the vessels in a capillary network. So 1, highly branched, 2, in close contact with tissue, and 3, thin-walled. Which statements refer to the features that allow for efficient gas exchange? So is it A, 1 and 2 only, B, 1 and 3 only, C, 2 and 3 only, or D, 1, 2 and 3? So pause the video and try to answer that before I go over the answer. So the answer would be D. So the vessels are highly branched, they are in close contact with tissues, and they are thin-walled. So they need to be efficient at gas exchange. So you don't need to remember thin walls, highly branched, usually got a large surface area, and in close contact with tissues. So question 4 says the following sentences give information about blood vessels. Pick the correct underlined word to make the sentence correct. So arteries have a thicker or thinner muscular wall with a narrow or wider internal diameter than veins. Arteries carry blood at lower or higher pressure away or from or back to the heart. So try to write that out correctly before I go over the answer and pause the video. So the answer is that arteries have a thicker muscular wall with a narrow internal diameter than veins. Arteries carry blood at higher pressure away from the heart. So the following are types of mammalian blood vessels. So you've got artery, vein, and capillary. Choose one of these blood vessels and describe its structure and function for 3 marks. So pause the video and try to pick one and write its function and structure before I go over the answers. So the answers are: the artery structure is that it's thick-walled elastic walls, narrow internal diameter or narrow channel, and its function is to carry blood under high pressure, and it's away from the heart. The vein would be that its structure is that it's got thin walls and it's got a wide channel and it has valves, and its function is to carry blood under low pressure and it transports blood towards the heart. And for your capillaries, your structure would be that it's 1-cell thick walls, it's got a narrow diameter and it's got a large surface area, and its function would be to exchange substances with tissues. So well done if you managed to get that correct. The last question is: the heart is a muscle which pumps blood around the body and requires its own blood supply. Name the blood vessels which supply the heart's muscle with blood. So pause the video and try to answer the question before I go over the answer. So the answer is the coronary arteries are what supplies the heart with its own blood supply. So these are where the SQA questions came from. Now you can complete the activities below to review your learning by doing the heart past paper questions and the multicellular exam practice questions on page 40 and 41. We now have come to the end of the lesson, woohoo! So you should now be able to identify and name the four chambers of the heart, identify and name the major blood vessels leading into and out of the heart, state the role of the coronary arteries, describe the pathway of blood through the heart, lungs and body, explain why valves are present in the heart. So well done if you can confidently do all of that. If you cannot, then you need to go watch the video again. So that is the end of the video tutorial. Thank you for listening.